So I'm starting that one, right?
Yeah, well, we just do kind of like a overview, like you don't actually have to start. I'll give you a symbol, a sign.
Oh, okay.
And you're on.
Good evening. Thank you for joining PL Talks. My name is Ian Carruthers, and joining me this evening is Jean-Louis Bleau.
Hello.
And for those of you who may not be familiar with PL Talks, this is an event that Pool Lawyers has the pleasure of hosting a few times a year, and our goal is simply just to bring Calgary artists, performers to the attention of the Calgary community, and just to get a chance to get to know them a little bit better and maybe get to know them in a way that you might not know them just by watching a performance or viewing a painting. Throughout this session, if you have any questions, feel free to enter them in the chat box, and then at the end of the talk we'll have a chance to do some Q&A. And so, as I said, joining me today is Jean-Louis Bleau, a colleague of mine from back in my days as a musician. Jean-Louis is the interim director at the Mount Royal University Conservatory. He is also a sessional instructor at the University of Calgary in the Interdisciplinary program. He is an artistic and choir director of choirs both at U of C, Mount Royal University, and also in the community. And he has been recognized for his career accomplishments by Calgary's 40 Under 40. And if you work in other fields, you might have a chance to run into him from time to time because he is an avid collaborator. He very much enjoys the opportunity to collaborate with other artists from different fields. And just from a personal note, JL and I attended University of Calgary together about 15 years ago. And I always thought, well, when there's all the musicians sitting in the lobby talking about cool things to do and never doing them, JL was the guy that was actually going out and doing them. And I always admired that about him. So thank you for joining us today, JL.
Thank you, and thank you for that introduction. Sparked some memories.
That's right. So what we'll do is we're going to actually start talking about one of the choirs that you direct. It's a choir that's at Mount Royal, and it's called RTO. So can you please tell us a little bit about this choir?
Sure. So RTO was used to be called the Mount Royal Youth Choir. And we wanted to do something different as the conservatory is getting prepared to move into the new Taylor Center for the Performing Arts at Mount Royal University. And so with Calgary having so many choirs and so many really, really good choirs, we thought we'd try and do something different. So an intrepid group of young performers and I came up with the concept of doing choral theater. So where we actually kind of take theater, movement, and music and combine them and crash them together and see what can happen. And it was a slow process to kind of develop, but we kind of hit a groove in some of the approaches that we have. And you kind of, within the choral community, you have your basic stand and deliver choir. There's also show choirs, which incorporate movement, but usually using pop music, Broadway classics. And then there's RTO. And we're the ones who are kind of the misfits. I like to kind of refer to RTO as the choral misfits of Calgary. We're a rowdy group of choral misfits. And so it was taking a group of young people who are passionate about choral music and who are not afraid to try new and different things and to try and incorporate movement, to put on a costume, to become a character within a choral drama.
And I think maybe some people who are not familiar with RTO's work might not fully comprehend what you mean about it being different from a standard choir. So we're actually going to show a video clip of RTO. It's a trailer of RTO performing a work. And I think people will be able to get a bit of a better idea what you mean. So if we could put that clip on, please.
Certainly.
So I think that gives some people a bit of an idea of what RTO does, but perhaps could you tell us a little bit more about that performance?
Certainly. So that particular piece was actually a commentary that we were working on about humanity's impact on the environment. And so there's a tree that was being ripped apart in that performance, but we really tried to imagine kind of a dystopian world and try and present kind of environmental issues in terms of that performance aspect. And it what we do is we take different choral pieces, kind of smash them together. We collaborated in that instance with the Lily String Quartet. Threw in a piece of Shostakovich that kind of had this angstiness to it that really captured the mood that we were trying to convey. And then for the movement components with that particular piece, we were collaborating with Kunji Markiketa, who is a notable dance and theater artist in the community. And so it was a really wonderful opportunity to collaborate with a number of individuals, and for the young people in RTO to have the experience of working with those artists, and to not just kind of prepare for your standard concert performance, but really invest a lot of time in learning the music quickly and confidently so that you can then actually occupy a space. Usually we kind of stand on a set of risers and just deliver sound, but this really required the singers to be all over the stage. And at the end of the video, there's clips of the choir in a rehearsal just kind of sped up, and you see how much they're kind of moving around the stage, and really how physical that choral theater that we do is can be.
Yeah. Well, I think it was very effectively done. I mean, I only saw the YouTube video from the comfort of my home office, and it's very rare where I have a performance experience that I really remember how it made me feel. And just watching this clip, really, it made me feel uncomfortable. Not that I didn't like it, but it was very effectively done. And I can only imagine, I expect that if I'd been there live, this also would have been one of those performance experiences I would never forget.
This usually happens actually. And that's why I think I described the singers in RTO as fearless, because we do really try and capture some strong emotions. One of the pieces that we did was based on the death of Matthew Shepard, the young gay individual in the 90s who was murdered, which created a lot of change in society. And capturing the impact of that was really difficult, but at the same time, the singers really rose to the challenge, and it did have the impact that we had intended it to have.
That's great. Well, very, very well done with that then.
Thank you.
Now, one of the segments of there, people might remember that there was a segment where people were crouched down and making some different kind of sounds than you expect a choir to make. And turning their heads really suddenly. And you've mentioned that's by a composer, Amory Schaefer. So can you tell me a little bit more about Schaefer's work and how that's influenced you?
Definitely, actually. I think Amory Schaefer's music is kind of what led me down the path, the artistic path that I'm on now. He's a Canadian composer, most notable for kind of coming up with, being attributed with kind of coming up with the concept of acoustic ecology and soundscapes. And as a composer, he kind of pushed against convention. And so he's very outside of the box, both figuratively and literally, and that he saw that music was being performed in boxes, in concert halls, and it was a very sterile environment. But the reality is music was born from humanity out in the open and is meant to be performed out in the open, and many cultures still do that. But we had kind of, within Western music, really tried to confine music. And so he came up with the idea of taking music back out into nature, and allowing nature to also impact the music. And my first experience with Amory Schaefer was in a Canadian Studies class at the University of Calgary. And it was an option, and he was not taught in my music classes, which I found very interesting. But I'm so grateful that I had the experience of learning about a piece called Music for Wilderness Lake. And it's a piece for 12 trombones scattered around the lake, and it's performed at dawn and then at dusk. And he explored how the air over top of a lake will either keep the sound low or raise the sound up, and how far sound will travel. And so he was really playing with that, and CBC did a recording of it, and I saw the recording, but I wasn't satisfied with it. And so I gathered a group of 12 trombone players, and we went out to Goat Pond in Kananaskis and actually performed the work, getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning so we could do a performance of the dawn version of this at 6 o'clock in the morning. And the impact of a live performance out in nature still resonates with me, because in the morning you hear birds starting to chirp, and it adds to the music, and you see the environment that's surrounding you. You hear how echo is bouncing off of the mountains in unique ways, and the performance is live and in that moment, and you realize that it will never be done the same way again. It can't be. And so there's that uniqueness to it that you don't really get in a concert hall, because in a concert hall it's sterile. You know what you're going to get, outside of mistakes that may happen, which I love mistakes in performances with my choirs. They're wonderful opportunities. But it was a unique experience of his music, and that got me into exploring his operas. And Schaefer not only pushed the music out into the open, but he also kind of stretched the idea of opera and performance. And I had the opportunity to participate in Princess of the Stars when it was done in, I believe it was 2000, I was going to say 17, but I think that's wrong. But it was out in Ontario. And Princess of the Stars takes place at 3 a.m. And so as performers, we had to be out in our spots at around 1 a.m. And you sit out in a canoe on a lake waiting for the audience to arrive, and then at 3 o'clock the audience is there for the performance, and the performance takes place completely at dark with characters who are lit up on canoes, and all the action is taking place on the lake, and it ends with the arrival of the sun kind of breaking over the horizon. And it was just this unique experience of performance, and how the environment can affect performance, and how it's so hard to actually explain, but it was just a pivotal experience for me, and really pushed me into that desire to collaborate and to do things differently as a performer.
Yeah, well, it's very intriguing just to hear these described. It must be quite something to be able to see that. So I think it's great that you've got RTO to present that kind of experience. I also think it's great that you've got enough charisma that you're able to get 12 trombone players to show up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Obviously, you've got a very heavy element of collaboration with musicians, and you're able to musicians and other artists, and you're able to really able to compel them to engage in this and to really intrigue them the way that you've described these performances. So what is it about collaboration that you value so much about?
I think collaboration for me is where the fun of performance is. It's the unknown. With everything that I've done as an artistic director, I'll come up with an idea or a concept and then share that idea with a colleague, and then they add to that idea. Or there's like moments of conflict where we actually might not agree on something, and we're trying to convince each other, and then we kind of shoot off in another direction. And so there's this wonderful magic that happens when you collaborate with other individuals, and it's exciting to experience. And on top of that, I've met so many people, from performers in Cirque du Soleil's aerialists, synchronized swimmers, puppeteers. It's just a wonderful playground of opportunity. And I think I'm a very curious person. And so a lot of the things that I've done come out of that curiosity. These are things maybe that I want to do, like working on aerial silks. I wish I could do that or had the strength to do that, or aerial straps. I think it just looks so amazing. Yeah. I don't have the talent to do that. So I kind of view collaboration as an opportunity to explore things that interest me and that I'm curious about, and to learn. And that's, for me, that's been the wonderful growth that I get out of collaboration.
So it's kind of a way that you personally are able to experience other art forms that not everyone can do everything, and so it's your way of being able to experience them by working with others.
Definitely. And the friendships that I create out of it, and future collaborations that have resulted, it has just been so rewarding. Recently, actually, during the whole COVID thing, I was able to bring a choir together to perform out at the Leighton Arts Centre with the Iniskim project, which was a project of Buffalo Lanterns that was part of when the Buffalo was returned to Banff. It was restaged, and Peter Bulkwill, the director of that performance, who I ended up approaching to work with me on a performance with RTO and the Calgary Men's Chorus and a few other ensembles for a Unison Festival. He invited me and a group of singers to actually be involved in Iniskim, and so there's this wonderful opportunity to share and collaborate. And it's not only one way; it's being invited to be in part of this project it was amazing, and it was another experience along the lines of Armory Schaefer. So it was right up my alley.
So it's not just that you're experiencing it personally, but others are getting the same benefit from working with you, and then you've got the excitement of working on a project together where you're all sort of experiencing this together.
Yes.
That's great. So I'm wondering if you could maybe share with our watchers, you seem to be very comfortable with being able to identify people and approaching people to collaborate with, and there's obviously great value to it personally, and what kind of interesting things can result. A lot of people that are watching might be a little reluctant, they might be shy or might not be able to recognize this. Do you have any advice to people, whether it's in the arts or in work or anything? How do you sort of get outside of your shell and identify people that you can work with in other fields and sort of get that same benefit?
I know for me personally, if I'm curious about something or have an idea, I immediately try and find people that can help me achieve that goal. And it's not always the first person that you might reach out to and approach that will be the person that you end up collaborating with. And so I think it's just, for me, it's just identify, somebody to collaborate with or somebody that you want to share that project with, and then ask them, well, would you be willing, or do you know somebody actually that would be great for this? And all of the collaborative relationships that I have formed have been kind of along that line, where I'll express an idea, share that with somebody, and they'll either be like, oh yes, let's work on this, or they'll say, who would be the person that you should talk to? It's this person. And I've never been afraid to actually kind of make send an email or just phone and say, hey, I'm wanting to do this. Is there any interest? And I've always found people are always responsive. If it's not something that they can be involved in, they'll either ask you to postpone the project because they want to be involved in it, they just can't do it now, or they'll suggest somebody that you can collaborate with. And sometimes the path that has led to some of the most memorable performances for me has been the longest winding road that I never would have expected. And in hindsight, kind of all those moments where I confronted roadblocks or barriers, or when things fell apart, all were pointing to something better. And it's hard to have that in the moment. Like there's a moment with the Unison Festival where I wanted to give up, because all the creative ideas I had were meeting with roadblocks or conflicting schedules with people. And we were set to perform with Tanya Tagak, and then something happened on her schedule, so she had to back out. But we had this Indigenous idea that we wanted to incorporate into the performance. And so all of a sudden that led to Peter Bulkwill, who led me towards a group of Indigenous drummers and the Buffalo puppets that were part of that performance. And all of a sudden everything got smashed together, and what we created was one of the most memorable performances that I've ever been a part of, where we took a piece of music that was about Somalian refugees, smashed it together with Indigenous drummers and buffaloes being returned to Banff, who are themselves refugees, and this idea of truth and reconciliation, which we were also trying to express at that time, just all coming together in this mix of music and art making that was so powerful. And the people that were there were deeply impacted by it. And so that's always rewarding when you have people coming up to you after, kind of congratulating you on the performance, and to kind of be looking back at everything that happened. Even the valleys that were kind of the darkest points, and realizing actually they needed to be that way so that I could shift focus.
Yeah. So it sounds like flexibility is really a key element of it, isn't it? When you get the roadblocks and being flexible for, well, that's not going to work, we better try something else. Or look at this guy that suddenly showed up. Let's think about what he can add to it.
Definitely flexibility is part of it. Actually, a story that springs to mind is working with Kunji Ikeda. And RTO is not a show choir, and I'm adamant that it's not a show choir. And I had to go on a choral conference, and he was working with a choir, and when I came back, he had done this show choir-esque thing. And I heard about it, and I was actually angry. And then he had the choir do the performance, and he was using the concept of show choir to show this idea of joy, but then had the choir shifting into these slumped over postures, which was conveying, we were trying to convey this kind of, everything is okay, but no, it's not. Deep inside, it's not. And so I was hugely impacted by it and kind of went, oh, okay, maybe I need to actually relax about some of these ideas that I have. And so those moments of friction and that being forced to be flexible actually have resulted themselves in some wonderful discoveries and have steered performances in some unique ways.
Yeah. Now, you've had an opportunity also to teach students about this at the University of Calgary. You're a sessional instructor for an interdisciplinary program, and so it's a program that is that's attended by music students, drama students, and dance students. So, what's your goal in teaching this class?
I was surprised to actually be invited to do this. It was a wonderful affirmation of the work that I do. I teach that with Bruce Barton, who is the director of the School of Creative Performing Arts, Heather Ware, who is a dancer, a well-known Canadian dancer, and Peter Bulkwill, who we met again in that course, and it was wonderful to kind of realize that we had done this work. But with that course, I think when we're working on our undergraduate, working in a discipline, we put ourselves in that box again.
Yeah.
And so the purpose of the course, especially for me, is I want people to realize the amazing opportunity and fun that collaborating and working on interdisciplinary in an interdisciplinary field can have to them as a career. I think a lot of people are afraid of it. They're afraid to take risks, and for me, one of the things that I love is taking risk. There's a line, and I can't remember where I saw it the first time, but it's a willingness to fail flamboyantly, and that has to drive you as a performer. And I think for me, from my perspective, when we're looking at art is intended to make people feel uncomfortable at times, to make a statement. But if you as an artist aren't uncomfortable with something that you're doing, maybe you're not trying hard enough. With the course, the Approaching Interdisciplinary course, there's a reading that I give the students, which is Yo-Yo Ma. It's a reflection by Yo-Yo Ma in his early career, where he was performing. His hands knew what to do, so he was allowing his mind to wander, and he realized he was bored. And he looked out at the audience, and he realized the audience was bored as well. And so it's not enough to just do music. You have to connect with it, and if you don't connect with it, your audience isn't going to connect with it. If you don't kind of invest your person in the performance, if you don't feel something in the performance, it's going to create, it's going to have no impact. And so that there's those ideas, especially from the perspective of music students. Because part of my role in that course is to really appeal to music students and let them know, like, the opportunity that as a musician you can entertain, or you can engage in that interdisciplinary field, and so it's been fun to see what students come up with, to see how it impacts students. It's also been interesting to see the resistance that some students have. There's nothing wrong with actually, conveying music the way that it was written, and wanting the audience to kind of reflect on that in their own way. But there's so much more, and I think that's, for me, one of the goals is to allow students to see that there's so much more and be impacted in the way that Armory Schaefer's music and discovering that kind of impacted me and kind of blew open the doors of what music could be.
Yeah. So there's the trying to teach the students the value of sort of being a little bit more bold about how you're performing, and it sort of gives them this opportunity. They have to do that. A music student has to do something that's dance or drama related. A drama student has to do something dance, music related, and so on. But it also has the added benefit that once they move on and they're still going to have their conventional careers as musicians, dancers, or performers, and I can say certainly from the point of view as a musician myself, there's that added benefit of recognizing what Yo-Yo Ma recognized, which is, well, I don't want to bore my audience. I mean, sure, I can play the notes, but how do I make this something engaging for them, even if it's within that particular discipline that you're involved in? So can you think of any particular successes that these students have had, performances, or anything memorable from this course?
We ask the students actually every class to kind of, we put them in groups and ask them to come up with something, and we'll usually give them parameters. And I know one class I give them the parameter of kind of modeling after Armory Schaefer, of asking them to go into spaces in the room, the large space that we actually hold the class, to go into the smaller spaces, to go into the unused spaces. And it's amazing to see how the students kind of embrace that, where all of a sudden I remember going upstairs to a small space and the light was shining in, and so all of a sudden the light became, and shadow became, part of this performance that the students came up with. And I was just surprised with, how did they get there? How did they kind of, with the parameters that they were given, all of a sudden shadow, light, and fire, the idea of fire became part of the performance. Or an elevator. Elevators, for some reason, in this class have create some unique performance opportunities, and so we've had performances where the performers are in the elevator with an audience member as you go up, and then the performance takes place as you're traveling in the elevator, or where the performance takes place and the audience is divided, and something happens at the bottom and something happens at the top, and you're able to hear things going on. But it's always a surprise what's happening based on what you've heard when the door opens and you see something going on. I think one of the most memorable for me is a performance that took place in one of the bathrooms, and the audience was invited into the stalls, in every second stall, and the performers were in the other stalls, and there was a saxophone and voice and movement that was all incorporated into this performance that you really, if you were in the stall, you actually couldn't see. And so you really had to actually use your ears to experience the performance. And it was just, it was wonderfully creative. And these are moments where the students are just asked to come up with something with only 10, 15 minutes to plan it. And then they execute a short performance. And it's amazing to think what they could accomplish if they come together and invest time in creating a fully realized performance, and how impactful that could be.
Yeah.
When I've you kind of witness how creative the students can be if they're asked to do this work. And I think that's the pleasure of doing this class, and the importance of this class in particular for the arts is, having people come together to share their experience of what their discipline is and create something new. Especially for musicians, speaking from that perspective, because it all of a sudden gives you a vocabulary to talk with dancers or to talk with theater people, and you're no longer kind of stuck in the orchestra pit.
Yeah.
Which usually with musicians, you're asked to kind of be involved in something, they stick you in the orchestra pit, but all of a sudden to be able to say, actually, you know what, we could be on stage with the dancer at this time doing this.
Yeah.
It just really creates a more dynamic experience for the audience and for the performers.
Yeah. Well, it's great to see you have such a vision for it, and that you're able to instill that in the students of this program so successfully. So that's great to hear. So we're gonna switch gears a little bit here. So you're a man who wears many hats. So one of your positions, one of your roles is you're currently the interim director at Mount Royal Conservatory University Conservatory. So I think, probably most people watching are familiar with the conservatory, but can you just describe a little bit about the conservatory's role and what influence it's had in the music scene or in the art scene in general in Calgary?
So the conservatory has been around since 1910, and it's always been a part of Mount Royal when it was first a college and now a university. And in terms of its impact on the musical landscape of Calgary, I'd say I think you could probably connect any artist in some way, shape, or form to the conservatory. A lot of musicians in the CPO teach at the conservatory. A lot of our conservatory students who've grown up through the programs have gone off and created their own schools within Calgary, kind of pushing out into the community more and providing that music education to community members. And there's that link back always to the conservatory. And so the conservatory's had a long and successful history of music education, not just in Calgary too, but it pushes out nationally and internationally with our students performing on international stages or being part of orchestras around the world. And it's exciting to be a part of the conservatory, and also intimidating, because the people that have been involved in building the conservatory that have done such amazing work, it's intimidating to kind of be the interim director and seeing all that's been done, still the need and the drive to continue that work. It's exhilarating and scary.
Yeah. So what kind of challenges has the conservatory faced with everything that's been going on with COVID-19?
It's difficult, especially with technology, to engage music. I think the thing that's been most frustrating for me, or not frustrating, but upsetting, is we can't bring our ensembles together, especially singing ensembles, because there's restrictions on singing. And so we're not able to meet as a choir, and technology hasn't caught up with the ability for music groups to come together to make music. And so that's created a huge challenge. And so we've had to press pause on some of those programs, but we're planning for kind of restarting those programs and are really kind of chomping at the bit to get those programs up and running again. But we've also actually gained a lot of knowledge from COVID. All of our instructors, when we had to start teaching online, became less resistant to the idea of and value of teaching music online. When you're I remember kind of trying to encourage some instructors to think about online teaching, and there's a resistance to it. There's this need to, as a teacher, you have to be in the room, you have to manipulate and adjust with the student, and it's a very kind of in-person experience. And when we were all forced to actually make it work, it made us all realize that actually this is effective. Learning music online can be effective. And in fact, we had an uptick in lessons, especially related to guitar, because of the pause that happened in the economy in March. Some people had extra time. And so they were looking to take in guitar lessons online. So there's this wonderful opportunity that happened, and this awakening, I would say. And I think one of the other things too with that is it started me thinking about some of the people that are around the world that have maybe been associated with the conservatory at one time or another have kind of been approaching, saying, hey, is there opportunity for me to teach online? They'll still have connections in Calgary, and they reconnecting with their students and teaching is something that we never really none of us had ever really thought of before, and now all of a sudden it's a reality. So that's created a wonderful opportunity. And then too, because we've been putting online lessons out there in terms of marketing, we've had students from Latin America who've signed up for lessons through Mount Royal Conservatory in Calgary, and so our instructors are now teaching those students in their own language, because we have a plethora of instructors. So we actually reached out to all of our instructors and say, what other languages do you teach in? Are there opportunities here? And so it's in the same way, going back to Schaefer, in the same way that Schaefer was looking at the concert hall and kind of blowing it open and saying, let's get things back out there, the idea of COVID's impact has kind of blown things open in terms of music lessons and made us realize that from the perspective of private lessons, I should say, that we can engage with instructors from around the world. Our academy program has made a really effective use of this. We've always brought in international instructors to work with our students, but now we had to kind of not fly them in, but use technology to bring them in to work with our students, and we're realizing that we can probably expand that experience that those students have of working with international pedagogues and musicians in a far greater way. We still want to, when we're able to, have those students work in person with those instructors, but now there's nothing really stopping us from actually saying, hey, we would like to do something with this instructor. He doesn't have the time to come to Calgary, but we can create this online experience for the students. And I think that's really exciting. So COVID is at points frustrating, but at the same time, it'll be exciting to see where this takes us.
So it's another example of an obstacle, and you and all the teachers have been forced to be flexible, but in the process, it's expanded the opportunities for the conservatory, for the students, for teachers, and also for people elsewhere in the world that can now connect into the conservatory and start enjoying the benefits of studying or teaching there.
Yeah.
What about musicians in general? How has COVID affected them?
I remember my experience when COVID, in March, of this feeling of being silenced as a musician. RTO was actually scheduled to do a performance in Rat's Nest Cave. We were going to take choral music down into a cave with a small audience, and it was this really unique experience. And to have that kind of ripped away, and for the group to be silenced and shut down was really difficult. But after kind of musicians got their feet under them, people began being very creative in how they were engaging music and making music again. And there are so many performances that took place, in people's front yards, musicians who had just kind of set up on their front yard and performed for people in the community. I know for me, Armory Schaefer's music all of a sudden just kind of came to the fore again, because when you're outside, you don't have to worry about any of those indoor restrictions. You don't have to worry about being in a concert hall. And so I worked with Laurie Mediation at the Conservatory, and she reached out to 12 trombone players again, as well as clarinet, horn she had played, flute, and a number of students. And we worked to do some of Armory Schaefer's music outdoors, and it was really neat to kind of have that experience of Schaefer's music kind of come to the fore again. And so a lot of musicians found a way forward and are still finding a way forward. A lot of music organizations actually are putting a lot of stuff online, and so in some respects, the doors have been blown open in terms of what you can experience, because I was receiving online performance invitations to performances that were taking place in the States and elsewhere in Canada. One of the most memorable experiences I had was the Illuminato Festival in Toronto over the summer. Rather than completely folding and shutting down, released Armory Schaefer's Credo and Apocalypsis and still images from it, and it was amazing to experience that work, because I couldn't have gone to Toronto when it was performed.
Right.
And so there's all these wonderful opportunities. The CPO has been doing some amazing online performances over the the Halloween break. They did L'Histoire de Soldat by Stravinsky, which is a piece I studied, and it was one of the another hugely impactful piece for me creatively. And Calgary Opera has a Yuletide performance coming up. So everybody is actually finding ways to press forward, and what is happening is that we're appealing to a broader audience not just the Calgary catchment area.
Oh, right.
One of the choirs at Mount Royal, Cantorai, released a video, and that video has been seen by thousands of more people than any of their performances would have been seen by, because the concert hall is limited.
Right.
And so we're just having a broader reach. That said, all of us as musicians want to have that intimate experience again of performing in the concert hall, of performing for an audience that's in front of you, of being able to feed off of that audience. That's one thing I think for me that I kind of lament, is that, you know, as a performer, when you're performing for a camera, it's not the same as performing for a live audience.
Right.
And there's an adrenaline rush that happens there, and we all want that again.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
soon, hopefully.
Yeah, soon, hopefully. Well, I remember, you know, when I used to do more performing, and there's nothing like that experience at the end of a maybe a more somber piece, where it's over and there's that silence, and if you're the conductor or whoever's leading it, you just hang on to it and you just milk it for all it's worth, and you just know the audience is there. And unfortunately, I don't imagine you can get that on a screen.
No, unfortunately. But I do have to say, like, Early Music Vancouver's had some amazing performances that I've been able to watch. A performance of Iranian or Persian music from the 1700s, which was just kind of mind-blowing. And so there's these wonderful opportunities that are happening. But yeah, getting back in the concert hall, performing live, getting back together in person with students, I think we all are really craving that.
Yeah. So how about for people that might want to watch the CPO or any ensemble and might be thinking, oh, well, there's no performances because we can't all gather it together in Jack Singer Hall. Are there any ways that people can sort of identify or find performances that they would be able to watch now while COVID is still going on?
I think actually the best thing to do is sign up for mailing lists.
Oh, yeah.
Because you'll be surprised at how innovative groups in Calgary and elsewhere are being. And if you have an interest, so we were talking beforehand, Renaissance music and early music is an interest of mine, and you know, being able to see what Early Music Vancouver is doing and kind of being able to experience a performance. I mean, everything is online, so it's a matter of just searching and signing up to be notified of things. And yeah, that would be the best way to kind of approach it in my mind.
Okay. And then what about for people that might want to get involved with the conservatory? How can people get involved with this conservatory or support the conservatory these days?
I think actually I kind of, in terms of not just the conservatory, but in terms of music making, I would encourage people to take music lessons, to engage music lessons. I think one of the things that I've kind of been aware of is I've been thinking back to when my family would get together when I was really young, and my grandmother would pull out her accordion, my uncle would pull out a guitar, somebody would pull out the spoons. I mean, everybody was singing or did something musically and was able to kind of create entertainment. And we don't do that well anymore. And so I think this is actually an opportunity for people to just kind of explore kind of the fun of making music and to try it. So I would encourage people to do that. I'll make a plug for the Conservatory's Speech Arts and Drama program. I mean, with all of us being on Zoom and various other things, you know, being able to articulate and speak well. If you're struggling with that, by all means, contact the Conservatory. It's been interesting that while our ensemble classes haven't been able to proceed, and some of our music lessons have had to be scaled back, our speech arts program has thrived. Because there's being able to speak and communicate one-on-one is something that we're doing, and we're doing very well with the technology that's there. And so if people want to explore that, I would encourage them to do that as well. But really, like, create. Find ways to learn how to create. And if you are passionate about something or curious about something, now's the time to do it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and I can say from the point of view of a lawyer who does court appearances on a regular basis, I could probably benefit to take a lesson or two at the speech program.
We have some of the best instructors in actually Canada. The person who runs our speech arts program, Jennifer Orr, is the one who developed the curriculum for RCM as well as us. And yeah, we got it. We got speech arts down at the conservatory.
Excellent. Well, I think this might be a good time to take any questions that we might have.
Yeah. Cassandra Walker asked, JL, do you have a performance project in the works in the near future that you're particularly excited about?
So the question is, do you have a performance project in the future that you're particularly excited about?
I spoke about RTO, that idea that we were getting ready to go into Rat's Nest Cave to do a performance for a small group of people. I actually am kind of grateful for the COVID-19 situation because it allowed me to rethink that performance. And RTO's always gathered a variety of pieces and stitched them together in a performance. And what I've tried to do now, especially with the fact that I don't have to commute, which is usually 2 hours, I'm investing that time in composing. And so I've been working on a mini opera that would take place in the cave. We were planning on collaborating with Peter Bulkwill, who's going to do some puppet lanterns for the performance that we were creating, but now I'm wanting to actually create a larger, kind of more cohesive performance. And so that's what I've been exploring. And so I've been exploring the idea of sound art and sound design with the voice, so that it's not so much conventional music that we would, and choral music that we would think of, but just if I'm going to take an audience down into a cave, which is a very disconcerting experience, but I encourage everybody to go to Rat's Nest Cave and do it. It's unbelievable. But if I'm going to take people down into a cave, it's an otherworldly experience. And so I've been exploring sound and creating, kind of capitalizing on that otherworldly experience to kind of come up with vocal sounds that are unique as part of this opera. And so you won't hear a traditional choral piece of music in that, but you'll hear something that's more dynamic and free, and meant to kind of really make the space come alive.
That's great. Well, I look forward to that performance going forward.
So do I. It is on the books, and I've actually reached out to Adam Walker at Rat's Nest Cave and have kind of said, are we still good to do this when we're able to? And so we're still planning to make it happen.
Excellent.
Trevor Holmes asked, innovation on the road of music has always been a difficult thing to continue to update. As a conservatory director, what are your thoughts and expectations regarding future innovations in the field of music?
So as the interim director of the conservatory, what's your thoughts on the future innovations in music?
Actually, I think how people are being forced to be more creative with the restrictions that we're facing, I think that in and of itself is creating some amazing and unique opportunities and innovative ideas. My hope would be that we as music instructors will actually embrace technology, embrace innovation, and actually continue kind of to push forward with that online musical experience. My fear, being the director, is that when we're able to return to in-person lessons, that we'll all of a sudden kind of swallow ourselves back up again into this building and be in that box again.
Yeah.
And I would really, really like to see us all kind of continue to push out and reach a broader range of people and experiences. I know one thing that we've talked about at the conservatory is, we now have the opportunity to reach smaller communities. So what can we do to make that happen? And so I think that would be one of my hopes in terms of innovation. In terms of just innovative ideas, I mean, I've seen some wonderful and amazing things come out. One of the earliest performances that I ended up seeing was Kunji Ikeda kind of in his house doing this whole dance performance, being trapped in a room. And it was funny at the time because it was early on, and at the same time it was also very poignant because it was kind of what we were living and experiencing at this time. There's also been some unique things that have actually happened, not music related, but where performances are actually starting to take place in unique ways. And I'm thinking like the revival of outdoor drive-in movie theaters. I'm mindful of the performance at Halloween where you couldn't go through a haunted house, so a group of people decided to actually have cars drive up, and then the performance happens around the cars. So I think people are being innovative and creative in unique and amazing ways, and it's exciting to see. So I hope that continues. And I know for the interdisciplinary class, we're already talking about that. You know, do we give students this idea, plant this idea that they need to create a performance that responds to the situation, the circumstances that we're finding ourselves in now.
Yeah.
We're still kind of on the fence about whether or not we approach that, but I think we will definitely strongly suggest it. So.
Okay, well, this has been very interesting. Thank you very much, JL. And just quickly, just thank you to Robin Young for organizing and setting up this PL Talk. Jeff Poole and Poole Lawyers for their ongoing dedication to this very valuable program. And thank you to Matt Waddell for his excellent lighting and technology and helping the live program run smoothly as always. And thank you one more time, JL, for coming. It's been an absolute delight.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.